Welcome to the world of Aora, a news and lore podcast about Pillars of Eternity and Avowed, as created by Obsidian Entertainment. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino. Thank you all for listening. Let's get into today's lore. Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the World of Aora. I am your host, Eric, aka Gingerino. Thank you everybody for joining me on another episode as we dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics of Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, gearing up for the release of Avowed, which comes out in less than a month at this point in time. If you are new to the show, welcome to the show. Really glad and happy to have you here. If you're wondering what the heck Pillars of Eternity is, or maybe what Avowed is if you started at Pillars of Eternity, they're different games developed by Obsidian Entertainment that share the same fantasy setting called Aora. And so, as the theory goes, if we dive into the first two Pillars of Eternity games, then we can glean some insights as to how Avowed might be, and we can appreciate the nuances of the writing and the development of the game when we experience it. And I'm looking forward to being able to change this intro to just about Pillars of Eternity and Avowed together as a thing. So again, if you are new, I'm really happy that you're here. I know there's a lot of people that are getting into the Avowed mindset because the Avowed is starting to enter into, I think, its marketing phase. They're starting to amp up some content releases, and I know search queues or search queries are happening, and people are going to find this podcast. So if you are new here, I want to signpost you to episode 0, which just signposts you to other episodes that are more foundational in terms of lore about the world of Aora, if that's what you want to do, if you want to look at some of the foundational stuff and then move on from there. But you're more than welcome to start off at today's episode. Today's episode is a very special one for me personally. We're going to finally do an episode on the god Wall. Now, for those who have been long-standing fans of this show, you might be surprised to find out that there is an entire deity of the 11 deities of Aora that I haven't done an episode on, and especially 100 plus episodes in, and that wasn't by accident. I kind of have recorded stuff for a Wall episode for a while, and I've uploaded it to secret corners of the internet every now and then just to see if people would randomly find it, and of course never did because I didn't do anything with it. And I ended up deleting a lot of them because I would want to re-record some of that stuff. It always felt weird, though, doing an episode on Wall. And if you are a deep Pillars of Eternity nerd, you might know why. Doing an episode about the god of dreams, mysteries, secrets, and revelations seems weird because it almost seems... I don't know what the word to use. It seems heretical or sacrilegious in some way, because Wall is one of the 11 deities within this fantasy world that we see through Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, and he's heavily associated with the obfuscation of knowledge, and the spreading of knowledge, especially esoteric knowledge, and revealing things that are secret, and secretizing things that people want revealed, and dreams and mysteries. It's a whole bunch of stuff. And so to do an episode about that god, to put all that information out there for everyone to hear, it weirdly felt, maybe paradoxical is a better word for it. But I know that I've always wanted to do a full Wall episode and put it out there officially rather than have people hunt it down in weird corners of the internet, as fun as that would be. So that is today's episode, because Avowed is going to come out soon, and I just thought this is a time to finally do this episode. For those who have been listening to the show for a while, I just want to give you a little heads up on the future episodes coming out for this show. And that is that, Avowed's going to come out really soon. And so if there are any topics out there for anyone listening, new or long-term, that you want covered on this show before Avowed comes out, please send me an email, worldofaora@gmail.com. Let me know the things that you want me to prioritize. There's not a lot of weeks left to make episodes out of. I'm not going to ignore Pillars of Eternity lore when Avowed releases. I'm actually going to probably turn focus on Pillars of Eternity whenever I can. And we'll talk about stuff that we see in the game of Avowed on lore episodes, and then I will try to, every time possible, point back to Pillars of Eternity to be and this is where we see similar concepts being used in those games. Because I'm never going to forget the roots of where this world was built from in the first place, and where this podcast got pretty much all of its content from in the first place. But if it is something that you would like covered before the deluge of content that will be Avowed comes in, please again send me an email, worldofaora@gmail.com. Now, before we dive into the actual lore for today's episode, I'll just cover over a quick piece of news, and that is, especially if you are, like a lot of listeners know the show, fans of fantasy lore, specifically the world of Aora, then you're in good company, because there are lots of places to go and see lore for the Pillars of Eternity world. Specifically, Obsidian Entertainment, the creators of Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, the creators of this very world that we're talking about, they are going to release a 5-part series on their YouTube channel called The Lore of Aora. And their first episode is out as of today when I'm recording this part of the episode currently, and it focuses on the species that you see within the world of Aora. Now, I'm going to wait till all 5 episodes are out before maybe I put out an episode extending the knowledge of it, like talking a little bit more about some of the things they bring up, or just recapping it. I might not do an episode at all, but we'll see. I'm going to wait till all 5 of those are out before I really talk about them at any length of time. But if you're interested, go and check them out. The first episode out, again, is on the species, the fantasy species that we see in Aora, and it's very short. It's only a few minutes long. It is voiced over by Matt Mercer, which is exciting because I now consider Matthew Mercer as one of my contemporaries, because I've been doing this longer than he was in terms of like recording lore for the world of Aora. And so like I welcome him into the fold of people who talk about the world of Aora lore. Matt, if you ever want some advice, just reach out anytime. Love to have a chat with you. But no, for real, everyone listening, like if that is something you're interested in, go check it out on Obsidian's website. But there is also other places to find lore if you just like really want to soak in that content. I know that Mortismal Gaming on YouTube has done several videos on lore for Avowed to help people get ready for Avowed. That was done a long time ago. And honestly, if you search Avowed lore on YouTube, you get a whole bunch of channels. I think Spell and Shield is another one that comes to mind. There's a lot. So go check out that content, especially as we ramp up the last month before Avowed comes out. Other than that, there's not really any news to go over. There was a bit of debacle with Avowed disappearing off of Steam for a while, but now it's back. I don't know why, and I think it's a no harm, no foul. This kind of thing happens more often than I think people realize. Games disappear from markets all the time. Pre-orders get randomly refunded for games out of nowhere. Like these things happen. That hasn't happened with Avowed. I haven't heard pre-orders getting refunded, but these things happen, and it's largely not a problem. So anyways, let's dive into today's lore on the god Wall, god of dreams, mysteries, secrets, and revelation.
I'm curious. What exactly did you find there?
As I quickly review my notes to get into this episode, I think to myself, Gingerino, what have you gotten yourself into? There's so much to talk about here, and I'm going to try to be concise about all of it, but we're going to go for it anyways. We're going to do as much as we can. I have a lot of time today as I finished work early, so I can record in the peace of my own home by myself. So let's get through this. Well, I don't want to say get through it, but let's get into this. Let's enjoy it. Come on. So Wall, that's W-A-E-L, and it's pronounced Wall, like in Walmart. I don't think there's any relationship there. And Wall is described as the patron of dreams, secrets, mysteries, and revelations. There are other things that Wall is the god over, such as illusions, visions, obfuscation, cryptography, symbols, and perception. Wall is a very enigmatic deity. Like the entity that is Wall, I wouldn't even call it an it. It will probably suffice for now, but they is probably a better term for Wall, as it is probably infinite personalities, but also just one personality. If I was, to just kind of go off the cuff and describe it on my own, Wall is a very enigmatic deity, and personally speaking, one of my absolute favorites, partially because it has to do with esoteric knowledge within the world of Aora, and the way their personality is expressed within the world, and the way their followers are just, I don't know, goofballs, noodleheads, weirdos. I love Wallites in the games of Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2. Even the weird hand occult from the Forgotten Sanctum DLC in the second Pillars of Eternity. Wall goes by other names such as the Obscured, the Eyeless Face, the 100 Visions, and He Who Sees and Is Not Seen. I mention these so that when we get into Avowed, if you hear any of those names mentioned, it's probably referencing this god, Wall. The symbol for Wall is a stylized eye, usually alone or in groups, and sometimes in great masses, or even just a swirling eye. Like all the gods of Aora, they can manifest physically within the world, and each god kind of takes their own unique way of manifesting. There are not a lot of consistent things about Wall, and so when they do manifest in the world, it can be completely different from other times that it manifests in the world. But one of the more consistent forms that Wall has taken when it does enter into the world in some physical way has been what has referred to as the obscured. This is a person of no determinate gender or age or shape, and they are constantly shifting genders, they're constantly shifting races, and they're constantly shifting their age. They just constantly look different. And they often as well, if I remember correctly, have faceless features. And when they speak, they are often heard speaking in an endless number of voices, both in known languages and unknown languages. So, in video games, it's really cool where they do like double voiceovers or triple voiceovers of voice actors talking, and it's supposed to be from one entity. Well, if you were doing it with Wall, you would have to have an infinite amount of voice actors all saying the same thing, but also probably gibberish at the same time. There is nothing about Wall that makes a lot of sense when I'm going to be talking about them. And I love that about Wall. But yeah, I love this idea of this person, because when you're Obsidian, you're thinking like, how do I represent a physical manifestation of a god that is as enigmatic and unknowable as Wall is supposed to embody? And I love the idea that like what they do is they take on a humanoid form, or at least in their most consistent fashion, and that humanoid form constantly is shifting into and out of different identification features, whether it's physical attributes of the different biological sexes, whether it's one of the races of Eora, whether it's the age, and probably even the voices as well. They're constantly shifting into and out of these different things. And I think that is very fitting and absolutely genius for the people that wrote it over Obsidian. And their faceless features mixed with the eyes. The other manifestation that is very consistent with this manifestation I'm already mentioning is that they are also a constantly shifting swirl of eyes. And in fact, when you are playing the game of Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire and you get to speak to Wall, for lack of a better word, directly, you actually get to see a vision of what Wall presents themselves to you, the player character, like. It is artistically rendered in the form of just this giant vortex of swirling eyeballs, and each eye is different from another eye. They are completely unique from them. So it's just this infinite array of eyeballs swirling in kind of like a tornado or just a mass of eyeball jelly, I don't know, and every eye is different. And we're seeing a lot of themes with eyes and obfuscation and mystery when it comes to Wall. It says within the lore for Wall, which you can read if you have the First Pillars of Eternity guidebook, which you can find in the PC files for the First Pillars of Eternity game. I think the definitive edition, if you happen to own that. It says that the objectives and thoughts are inscrutable to even the other gods of Eora. And Wall represents both the acts of concealment and obfuscation, as well as the acts of revelation and deception. And this is what makes Wall so interesting, is that you can never really know what the hell Wall is doing or thinking. And even the other gods don't know. The other gods look at Wall with raised eyebrows going like, what the heck is that person doing or that thing doing? And I even wonder to a certain degree if Wall even knows. We've learned within the lore that Wall is capable of actually causing themselves to forget things. There was this thing that, and I'm not going to spoil it, but there's this thing that Wall wanted to hide. He wanted to hide it so well, or they wanted to hide it so well, that they actually hid it from themselves. So they put it somewhere and then made themselves forget that it was there in some way, shape, or form, which is a crazy thing to do. Like, how does someone do that? And I don't know. I don't know how to explain the metaphysics of how that would work, if there's like time travel involved, or if it can like literally remove memories from itself, or if it just wills this stuff to happen. And especially since it's also not the deity of forgetfulness. If anyone was, arguably that would be Andra, who's also goddess of the moon and the ocean. But Wall has the ability to make themselves forget things. And the thing about Wall is always about either obfuscating information or revealing information. And we see that at play with followers as well, in the sense of like hiding or revealing information, as well as seemingly doing just random things. If there is an algorithm or a method to the madness for what Wallites do when they follow their god, I don't know what the hell it is. And I suspect not even the people at Obsidian, or maybe very few of them, truly know like what is the mechanical driving force behind the worship of Wall, or what they know how to do as a Wallite. I don't know. If anyone at Obsidian does know, I would love to talk to you about it. Whoever writes the stuff for Wall, please reach out to me. Like this would be a conversation I would love to have, and I'm sure people would like to hear. Now, speaking of worship of Wall and the factions and religious orders associated with Wall, we can read in the lore that when people do worship the god Wall, and people do worship Wall within the world of Aora, the relationships that the normal, mundane, mortal Kith people, that's what they're called, Kith, have with the gods of Aora is not, I mean, maybe something that we're as familiar with in the modern world where we play video games like Pillars of Eternity. If there is something that you want, you will pray to a specific god that is associated with the thing that you want. As well, though, if you are also someone that is devoted to a single god, then your life tries to follow that, right? Like if you were someone who follows Woodica, you tend to be someone who is very bureaucratic because they're all about justice, law, and rightful rulership and that kind of a thing. And the gods are gods over these specific domains, but not in the sense of like, you are the person that upholds justice and you are the person who upholds dreams and mysteries. It's more, at least this is my personal interpretation, it seems more that like dreams, mysteries, secrets, and revelations is somehow an organic expression already in the world that speaks to the personhood of the deity it represents. So when I think of another deity like Magrin, goddess of fire and war, it's not that she upholds the existence of fire. It's not that war only exists because she exists, and whenever it happens, it's because she's making it happen. It's that there is something about war, and there is something about fire that is emblematic of their personality, of their nature, of just who and what they are. And so they kind of naturally fall into these positions of overseeing these things. And with Wall, that's what it is with dreams, secrets, mysteries, and revelations, as well as the other list of things I've mentioned earlier. And so as a result, Kith people often pray to Wall to hide secrets or to reveal them. Followers of Wall are known for many strange and unusual practices, possibly for good reasons, possibly for no reason at all. Wall followers are often founders and caretakers of centers of learning, including libraries. So as weird as it is to like think about this god that represents itself with a swirling vortex of eyes and hides esoteric knowledge, there is like mundane people within the world that worship this god. And when I say mundane, I don't mean that in like a negative way. I just mean like a normal person that would exist within this world of Aora who is just like a librarian. They would be someone who might worship Wall because of, information being a very important part of the aspect of who Wall is. But beyond just like the individual people who might be like, librarians or I want to say jesters for some reason, or wise councils and king's courts maybe. I don't know. I'm just kind of grasping at straws with my own head here. There are also organizations that get together. Some of them could be religious organizations like a church that worship the deity. There could also be other non-religious organizations that get together in the name of Wall to like live life based off of something but they would pray to Wall as a result. There are two factions that I want to talk about that we see within the lore, although there are certainly going to be more within the world of Aora. One is called the Sorrows of the Forgotten Dream, and the other is called the Hand Occult. I'll start off with the Sorrows of the Forgotten Dream because there's not a lot we know about them. This is mentioned on page 82 of the second volume guidebook for Pillars of Eternity. It's Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, the guidebook. And you can also find in your PC files if you own, I can't remember which version, the Obsidian version? I can't remember exactly. Maybe the Ultimate version, I think is actually what it's called. You can find this on page 82 of that PDF file under different religious factions. And we have here Sorrows of the Forgotten Dream. And when we read the lore for it, this is what it says. It seems a contradiction for Wall, god of mystery and obfuscation, to have an organized following. The god's devotees roost in unlikely places, back alleys, pleasure dens, the halls of ancient ruins, other churches, etc., to celebrate and remember the dreams which they forgot upon waking. They do not consider the meaning of their dreams as possessing any intrinsic value of prophecy. Rather, dreams are the divine's way of voicing the meaninglessness of all existence and the ephemeral nature of sanity. Referring to themselves as sorrows, that's capital S sorrows, recognizes the burden of melancholy they place on their strange enlightenment. The fragility of reality offers little comfort. The Sorrows of Wall do nothing to control how many acolytes join their casual ranks, but they prefer their numbers to be limited, believing that only a fraction of the population is equipped to handle the truth. So I love reading this about this year because this just gives a nice little snapshot of like what the theology, if you will, or the philosophy behind a Wallite view of life would be like. And I think it might be comparable to maybe some like absurdist views in our like own Earth world, I guess, if that's how you want to refer to it as. Absurdist views on life, that everything is meaningless, like nothing has any meaning. And so whether you're sane or not sane, it doesn't matter. Whether something is considered to have meaning or not doesn't matter. It's just everything is meaningless. And for people who follow Wall, they have tried, and some have probably succeeded at getting themselves to this place where they can actually celebrate this meaninglessness. They get to a place where maybe perhaps that's the comfort, is that there is no meaning in anything. And so they are able to kind of look at the world and be like, which means I can do whatever I want, kind of a thing, maybe. And I don't mean that in a negative way, like, oh, I'm so self-centered and I can do whatever I want, but in the sense of like, I'm free from any of these shackles of like worrying what people think. I'm free from worrying about like if I do something, it's considered right or wrong. And I'm free from all this stuff. I can just be, so I could see kind of a positive spin on that particular thing. Me personally, my worldview doesn't align necessarily, but I do think that it's really interesting. So this particular blurb starts out saying that it seems a contradiction for Wall, god of mystery and obfuscation, to have an organized following, which I agree, because Wall, to have an organized following would be way more Wodekin than Wallite. But things being contradictory within the realm of Wall is very Wallish, I would say. Anything that is contradictory or paradoxical fits in perfectly well within Wallite theology and Wallite worshipper. It says the god's devotees roost in unlikely places, back alleys, pleasure dens, the halls of ancient ruins, or other people's churches. This is to say that they're not really an organized religion in that particular sense. So they have an organized following, like they have a name, they have a group, they might even have different ranks among them, like it does mention a casual rank later on here, but like they don't have a church, right? Like there's no temple of Wall, at least not for these particular people, the Sorrows of the Forgotten Dream. They're very likely localized to the Deadfire region of the world. They don't really have a church. It seems like they might actually even go to other people's church. And perhaps this is an expression of the meaninglessness of things, of like, well, you don't need a church because it doesn't matter anyways. That might be part of what their theology is. And they celebrate and remember the dreams which they forgot upon waking. I find that interesting, that of remembering the dreams that they forgot upon waking. So is it that they can remember parts of the dream? Like, oh yeah, I kind of remember this dream I had and these were some elements to it, but I don't remember the rest of it. And then they celebrate this idea of like not remembering these things, of there being mysteries. And that is one thing that I see very consistently throughout a lot of like this like Wallowite literature, if that's what we're going to call it, is that this celebration of mysteries existing. We'll read it later on, but there's this note or journal entry where a person is in mourning over the idea that they know everything or they know a lot of stuff. And there's this other person who feels like they don't know anything. And that person's really distressed because they're like, I don't know anything in the world. I don't know what's going on here, what's going on there. And this Wallite worshiper is just like, I wish I didn't know more. Like, I wish there was more mystery to the world. Mystery is great. We celebrate the idea that there is mystery and that we can forget these things, that there are secrets to unravel. That is what they celebrate and value. And it says that here, that they don't consider the meaning of their dreams as possessing any intrinsic value or prophecy, but rather dreams are the divine's way of voicing the meaninglessness of all existence and the ephemeral nature of sanity. And so by their being enigmas, by their just being mysteries, then they are kind of engaging with what they consider really to be the only thing close to what meaning in life would even be, because all life is meaningless. And that is on its own pretty contradictory, I would argue, right? Like everything is meaningless. So they kind of pursue this idea that mysteries are good and we want to celebrate those mysteries. So they give themselves meaning within the meaninglessness. And that's very contradictory. But again, like I said before, because it's contradictory, it fits in really well with Wallite theology. And I love the writing here that they use to say the burden of melancholy they place on their strange enlightenment. And it really is a kind of strange enlightenment. There is a level of truth to it that you can see, but it is also melancholy. And I think strange in the sense of like we recognize that there's probably something wrong with this structure of thought. Not really sure necessarily what it is, but at the same time we can see that there is truth within it. And so it is kind of very mysterious on its own and clearly false, but also clearly true. And so I love the way Obsidian has kind of like walked that line with this paradoxical nature of what Wall is and what the people who follow Wall believe. Now, that is the Sorrows of the Forgotten Dream, and that just talks about, I think, a snapshot of any average Wallite follower. I want to turn attention now to a group that we spend a little bit more time with called the Hand Occult. I've talked about the Hand Occult before, and in fact, I've done my own episode on them, so I'm not going to talk at length about the Hand Occult, but I am just going to mention them here because they are a rather large organization dedicated to the God Wall. And so they are a secret organization. I mean, they are a secret organization, but a lot of people seem to know about them. So maybe it's kind of like a secret organization like the CIA is. Everyone knows the CIA exists, but they don't necessarily know what they're doing or what they're up to. Kind of have an idea, but we really don't know the specifics. I don't think the Hand Occult is the CIA, like they work for a government, but they are a secret organization, and they are dedicated to the God Wall. The main thing that they do is they deal with the flow of knowledge, especially esoteric knowledge, and they hide about as much as they make available. So the Hand Occult is this faction, just me kind of like going off the top of my head here, there's this faction dedicated to the God Wall, and they like to take really esoteric knowledge about the world and either hide it from common knowledge and view, or they like to do the opposite, which is take esoteric knowledge that's been hidden and bring it out into the world for people to know. And so they consider themselves the people who get to control this flow of esoteric knowledge within the world. That is what they view their purpose for, is controlling the flow of esoteric knowledge within the world of Eora. The Hand Occult get their hands on a lot of documentation. And we know that they have a little bit of influence in Avowed. Not that we will necessarily meet any Hand Occult members in the game, but they are kind of mentioned at the very least in one of the things that we've seen from gameplay of reviewers. There's this book called The History of the Living Lands, Redacted, and it appears that there was this person doing research in the Living Lands, and they were trying to write a book about it. But somehow, members of the Hand Occult would get their hands on this research notes, and they would just kind of black out all of the stuff, and then hide these books from being able to be publicly available. So there's something about the information that this researcher finds that they are trying to hide from the rest of the world. And they often do this. Something that's really fun, if you have the first Pillars of Eternity game on PC, if you look in your game files, again, I think you have to have the definitive edition to do this, but in the game files, there is a book called The Almanac of Eastern Reach for colonists, explorers, and curiosity seekers, which is a fun little read that is written from the perspective of someone in the world of Eora, and it's also been largely edited by Hand Occult priests. The thing about Hand Occult editing books or having books or being in control of any of these tomes of esoteric knowledge in the world is that they do a lot of editorializing with them. Sometimes they purposely falsify information to spread information out in the world that is not true. So they might, be responsible for helping create mythologies that aren't even technically true, but everyone believes. Or they might be responsible for putting information out there that is true, but people are a little bit unsure about. One thing I've always wondered about was there's this notion that the god Woodica, one of the other gods of this world, that she was the queen of the gods at one point in time and was stripped of her power and brought into exile. But I've found some contention within the lore that says it was ever true that she was in that position in the first place. I don't know. I'm reading into it personally, and this is just me thinking that. And I've always wondered if this is something that Obsidian can use, like this is their little thing they have in their back pocket to be able to say there is certain lore that is not true because the Hand Occult spread it. So as an example, what if Woodica never was the queen of the gods, but this is something that the Hand Occult, with the assistance of Wall, spread as information in the world, and now people have always believed it. Like, oh yeah, Woodica, one day she'll take back her throne because she was the queen of the gods, but she isn't anymore. What if she never was? And what if Wall, being as powerful as they are, was actually able to make Woodica, one of the other gods, believe that actually happened? And even all the other gods. Would Wall be able to do that? Would Wall be able to take something that isn't true and make other people, including other deities, believe that it was true? I don't know. And Wall is pretty enigmatic in the first place, so I would say that it stands to reason that it's possible. Did it actually happen? I don't know. From a creative perspective, it's really genius on Obsidian's part because then they could kind of retcon if they wanted to. I'm not saying they will, but they could retcon anything they want in the world of Eora and just be like, Wall did it. And then all of a sudden, boom, the retcon is now suddenly consistent with canon. And it's like, what a cool way to do that, at least in my opinion. So that's who the Hand Occult are. They are these higher level Wallite priests that try to control the esoteric flow of knowledge within the world. And if you're more interested in learning more about them, because there's a whole bunch about their structure and what they do and the things they have done and some of the lore that they're associated with, go and check out my episode on the Hand Occult. And they have a lot of influence that they've had, including my recent series that I've done, the anthology series on the history of Aora itself. But we still have other lore about Wall to cover, so let's move on to some other things.
If you find your trail has run cold, come to me with whatever you have. There is much I may be able to do for you.
So we've talked about Wall as a general overview and some of the names of Wall, what Wall is like and about, and a little bit about some of the factions and specific people, what the worshippers of Wall are like. But I found a really good way of being able to help understand some of this stuff is when you go to the literature that is supposedly, anyways, written by Wallite worshippers. All right, so like you can consider this capital S scripture for Wallites in some of these cases. So there are two in-game books that I want to look at. One is called Missives of the Hand Occult, which I think would be the closest thing you could consider to a Wallite Bible book, if that's what you want to call it. And there's another one, On the Fire-Forged Path, The Travels of Yarrick Yulton. Both of these books, if I understand right, should be in the Game of Avowed. You should be able to read both of these books in the Game of Avowed if you don't want to look them up on the internet or play Pillars of Eternity to read them yourself. So I'm going to read first the Missives of the Hand Occult. This is a book that you can get in the first Pillars of Eternity game. It is about the deity Wall, and it is just a few paragraphs long, but it gives a lot of theology behind what Wallites believe. So this is a letter, and it starts off, Dearest brother, or was it sister? May this letter find you in well spirits. A man of thuggish bearing stormed into my library the other day and demanded I help him find a book on the construction of an arquebus. I thought it proper service to Wall to steer this man toward an illuminated manuscript on the subject of whittling toy soldiers and other miniature props. Unamused by my solution, I shrugged and said, What is an answer without a question? He did not find my spiritual rhetoric helpful or amusing, and so he punched out 2 of my teeth. I trust your summer has been less tumultuous than mine. In more important news, my apprentice claims she saw the eyeless face in a dream the other night. I admit I was so mad with envy that at first I refused to believe her. Wall forgive me for such a lapse of judgment. She described an amawa of brilliant blue hues with a featureless face surrounded by a swarm of eyes, no 2 eyes alike. She claims Wall ignored her questions, and she can't recall any specifics of what was said. In fact, my apprentice seems to have forgotten many things since before the visitation. She could not tell me where she grew up or what she liked to eat. At first, I was so envious of her for having seen Wall with her own eyes, but it seems Wall's visit was to conceal, not to illuminate. I pray she endures this test of faith and can look back at the event and feel the joy of mystery. What is an answer without a question? Last week, I felt the solution was ignorance. But after Wall's visit, I feel a road without length is a closer answer to capturing the riddle. I worry my apprentice will look back at her visit from Wall and feel cheated, robbed of some moment of clarity we all thought we were owed when we first joined. I tried to tell her that she was lucky, but that she was too young to understand. What is an answer without a question? May I be dead and my soul scattered to the winds before anyone knows for certain. Thus concludes the reading of Missives of the Hand Occult by Gingerino. So here we have an epistle of Wall, at least from the Hand Occult. And so this is a message that is written from one Hand Occult member to another. I can't remember if it's a brother or sister, and which, that's just very Wallish of them to forget things. I really like this letter because it does a really interesting thing where it weaves in and out these narratives and themes that we see related to Wall, but also doing it in a very personal way of this person's life. They have this little anecdote here regarding a thuggish man that wanted a book regarding the creation of an arquebus, a type of gun, and instead he gives them an illuminated manuscript on the subject of whittling toy soldiers and other miniature props, which is a very Wallite thing to do, is obscuring the information that they're seeking, but illuminating other information that they don't necessarily looking for. It's a very Wallite thing to do, and this question gets repeated a lot throughout this letter of what is an answer without a question. Because this person, I guess, walked into this library, maybe didn't necessarily ask a question. They're just like, I'm looking for a book on how to make an arquebus. There's no question there, right? So, like, what are they really looking for? So what is an answer without a question? It says later that this person thought it was ignorance, and then later on thinks that it is a road without length. But at the very end of this letter, he concludes saying that he hopes he never finds out, because Wallites really do find a way to celebrate the idea of mystery. There being things that you don't know about the world is something to be celebrated from a Wallite perspective. So some of the lore that we see within this book: one, this person is in charge of a library, which is already pretty Wallish in the first place. Librarians are very often Wallite worshippers. An arquebus is a type of weapon. It's more like a rifle, and we'll see them in the Game of Avowed. Now, the term eyeless face, this is capitalized E-N-F, eyeless face. This is one of the monikers of Wall. So I've referred to them as the eyeless, but eyeless face is also another one there. And it talks here about this person who claims that they saw Wall in the form of the eyeless face in a dream that they had. And it also kind of just matches the description that I gave earlier of Wall's manifestation. And after this person experienced this vision of Wall in their dreams, they all of a sudden started forgetting things about stuff before that happened, like who they were, what their favorite food was, etc., etc. And at first, this one priest of Wall is a little bit jealous. Like, oh, you got to actually see God? Like, great. I would love to be able to see God. But he, upon contemplation, realizes that he still has the joy of the mystery of who Wall even is, right? Because once, here's the thing about it, and I guess I could kind of understand this. Once the last mystery is unraveled and everything is out in the open, and you have the answer to every question in the world, what is left? I mean, if the entire world is meaningless, right? That Wallites think, if everything is meaningless, then you're kind of finding meaning in whatever you can. But if you find the answer to every single question that exists in the world, then what meaning is there left in the world? I mean, really, is there any meaning left in enjoying beauty or art? Because I think a lot of things that's beautiful about good art is also the mysteries behind it, the mysteries of stories. But if you have every mystery answered, you know how every story is going to go before you read it. You know what every piece of artwork is supposed to invoke or talk about before you even view it. You understand everything. So if every mystery was revealed, then there truly would be nothing meaningful left in the world to enjoy or pursue. And so the very idea that, hey, there's still some mystery left in the world is like, hey, yes, there's still something that we can ascribe meaning to, even though the world is in fact meaningless, right? So I'm starting to understand. I'm almost convincing myself about some of the truth of this. I'm starting to understand. You know what? You're listening to a live conversion here. Okay. I do know the difference between reality and fantasy, not actually converting. I just think this stuff is really interesting. But yeah, so this is the closest we get to scripture for what a Wallite person in this fantasy world would believe. And, I'm going on this journey with you of understanding really what's going on here. Now, I'll leave you to ponder that a little bit more. I don't want to just beat it to death because it would be, very non-Wall to do so. But we'll move on to the next book called On the Fireforged Path. And this talks about a person's experience while in a Wallite worshipping community. This is a book that you can find in Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire, and this is about a Magronite's pilgrimage to Neketaka, and specifically visiting the Wallites there. Magronite, that refers to a person who follows the god Magrin, goddess of fire and war. Neketaka is a city within the Deadfire archipelago, a region within the world. So this person is traveling to experience different faiths within the world of Aora, and they go to the city of Neketaka to see if they can find a Wallite congregation there and experience what their faith is like so that they can write stuff out about it. That seems to be what this person's all about. So this is a bit of a longer one, so I'm not going to try to stay on it for too long, but I definitely think it's a fun one to read. And I do remember seeing this book in one of the gameplays of some of people on YouTube who have played Avowed, so I'm very certain you can find this book in the game of Avowed if you want to read it there. But here we go. Though I was born and raised a Magronite, and a Magronite now, I will stay. As a young man, I undertook a pilgrimage to visit a holy house dedicated to every god. In so doing, I hope to know them each the better, to take what they had to teach and sow it into my soul like so many seeds, that my soul might grow and bear only the most delectable fruit for my goddess to devour at the moment of my death. So it is with no small amount of amusement that I pen this account of my visit once to a church of Wal, the many-eyed, many-tongued god of dreams and secrets, revelations, and mysteries, and to reveal them to you as I learned there. The challenge came first in finding adherents to Wal's doctrine, for they are not often ones to announce their presence, preferring instead to build their flock from the solitary seekers who delve through ancient ruins and ruined archives in the search of strange, the bizarre, and the forgotten. But persistence is my goddess's first teaching, and find them I did. The Wallites' Nekatakan congregation was small then, as it is likely now, and on the morning I stumbled upon them, they were lounging like so many cats in the sun on the steps above Queen's Berth. I shared between them a bottle of arak and pipes packed with white leaf and rippled sponge. I knew them for Wallites, not for any badge or robe or trinket that they wore, not for their race or their age, but for the ardor of their debate on the most benign of topics. I begged that they take me to their church and permit me to worship with them, and they laughed as one, their many voices like the howling of wild dogs. They acquiesced when I told them of my quest, and then invited me to sit and share their drink. I did, and as the arak burned a trail of fire down my throat, they showed me the dimensions of their hall of worship. The stars were their pews, they said, the blue sky their ceiling, and their walls the edges of the world. All the creation sits within its bounds. As morning neared midday, they stood as one and began to climb the mountain. "Where do you go now?" I asked. "To worship," they replied. A great wave of relief washed over me, for at last I would have my lesson from them. We climbed the many steps of Nekataka, arrived at the last of the sacred stair. "Where is your temple?" I asked, and in response they whooped like children, rushing past me in a squall of smoke and laughter. I followed as best I could, though I wet my good slippers in a stream and could hardly keep my feet on the moss-slick stones, and as we surged soggy-foot and hollering into the temple of Gon. To worship, they cried. We shoved past dawn stars bent in praise of their macabre god, laughing all the while, and came to stand before a leafless tree whose boughs were hung in lanterns too numerous to count. I had nary a moment to catch my breath before the Wallites were clambering into the great tree's branches. A young man pulled me up with one hand and handed me a pipe with the other. The priests of Gon screeched and wailed, and all the while we squawked like birds, our smiles wide and eyes alight with the arak and lantern fire. The Mataru came soon after to chase us away, but not before we'd done our share of singing to the many-eyed, many-tongued god of dreams. Would that I could have stayed with them a while longer. But alas, I could not deny my soul its journey, nor the whispers of my goddess in my ear. I took again to the road in search of churches, but I must admit, I longed always for that tree. Thus concludes the reading of On the Fireforged Path by Gingerino. I guess I shouldn't say by Gingerino, it's by Obsidian, but read by Gingerino. Anyways, you get the idea. So there we go. It was a long one, and I did it in one take. So sorry if, I don't know, like go back and listen again if maybe you missed something. If you want to. I'm going to kind of go through it a little bit right now. So here's a quick rundown of what happened. There's this dude. He wants to go to every single church that is dedicated to, not every single church, but he wants to go to a church for each god within the world of Aora so that he may understand their faith a little bit more. And it says here that he wants to sow this knowledge like seeds onto his soul so that it will bear fruit, that it will be delectable for his goddess to devour at the moment of his death. If that's confusing to you, I understand. That is because this world has its metaphysics is a little different than our world. There's a cycle of reincarnation that exists within the world of Aora. Everyone has a soul. That's not a controversial thing. It's like an actual measurable known thing in the world of Aora that you have a soul, and that when you die, your soul will end up in another body in the future. And this idea that a god will devour your soul at the moment of death, there's a little bit of truth to that, I suppose, that when you die, your soul goes to the beyond where the gods are. And there is some notion within the lore of this world that part of your soul will feed and empower your god while it's there with them, and that it will return back to the mundane world in a new body with a little bit of it having gone to your god. Now, whether or not that's actually true, or whether or not that's just an explanation for why souls undergo erodement over time, which is a thing that we know exists in this world, I'm not gonna reveal that information because I'm really a fan of Wall right now, so I'm gonna keep that secret. But anyways, So that this person's got this idea of like, when I die, I want my soul to be beautiful and delicious to my God, and so I'm going to fill it with as much seeds of knowledge as I can. That's kind of like the poetic imagery that he's using here, and he's going to search the knowledge of each one of these churches to do so. So he goes to the city of Nekataka, and he goes to the sacred section of this city called the Sacred Stair, where a lot of churches to gods are. And he talks here about how challenging just to find them in the first place, because they're not unified by a single race. They're not unified by a robe or a trinket of any sort. And so finding them was a little bit difficult. But he says that he did eventually find them, lounging like cats in the sun on the steps above Queen's Birth. So, just these people who find the world meaningless, just kind of lounging in the sun because, hey, why not? Probably cats do it, so it seems like a decent idea. And he shares basically what is tobacco and marijuana or some other things with him. I don't know. There's arak and pipes packed with white leaf and ripple sponge. I don't exactly remember exactly what the earth equivalents are, but I'm pretty sure this is like different forms of narcotics. But he identified them as wallites based on what he says here, the ardor of their debate for the most benign of topics. So if you've ever gotten into a real heated argument with your friend over just the dumbest thing, congratulations, you might be a wallite follower. But that's how he identified them at that. And then so he asked them to take them to their church. They laughed at him because that's just not what they do. They don't really have a temple. And this is something I think we would see pretty consistently for a lot of wallite priests. And it seems like all the things that they did are pretty random and nonsensical, absurdist, and just on the spot. Like, okay, to worship, and then they burst into another temple. So it says here that when they're like, we're going to go to worship, they went through into a temple of Gon. That's Gaun. Gon is an aspect of the god Aethys, god of light and redemption. Gon is the aspect of Aethys that's more about reaping and death. And so they go into this temple of Gon, where Dawn Stars, and that's the name given to this priesthood of Gon, that's where these Dawn Star people are worshiping their god Gon. There's a lot of tongue twisters here. So they burst into these other people's temple, and they climb on this sacred tree that's in this temple, and they just start whooping and hollering and celebrating the god Wall and the mysteries that they have and the life that they have. And it seems like this person really, really appreciated the time with him. It seems to be like there is a carefreeness about this, and just a jubilance and an enjoyment of whatever is around you that I think that this person probably longed for. Being a person who is a Mogranite, which is marked by perseverance and trials and suffering and fire and war, being a Mogranite would be a very difficult road to walk. And I can imagine entering into the congregation of a Wallite religious community where there is just this like unregulated freedom to kind of just do what they did, and all of it is considered worship of their god. It's like, I can see why a Mogranite would be attracted to that. I definitely think there's some like loony bin aspects to what they're doing as well, and I don't know if maybe over time perhaps it would get monotonous. It would be more and more meaningless as time goes on. I don't know, but it's an interesting little story from the perspective of this person.
They are well.
We see between the strings of the world, and Aethys is there, strumming them like a lute. His tongue is still, yet he sings of a coming joy. What tune he plays, we do not know. It is complex, ever-shifting. One moment vibrating in harmony, the next in discord.
So we've talked a bit about who Wall is. We've talked about some of the people that worship him and what the theology surrounding Wall is like, and looked at two pieces of what might be considered scripture, especially one. And now we're going to move on to item descriptions, one of my favorite things about the game of Pillars of Eternity, and as we saw in some gameplay footage, the game of Avowed as well. So, item descriptions, what's the big deal with that? If you're new to the show, again, welcome to the show. Whenever you play a lot of video games, if you look at the item descriptions for things that you get in-game, sometimes you get things like, this is a weapon of such and such. It has these stats. It does these things. You can sell it for this much. Here are some of the things for it. But in a lot of video games, you'll also get an actual description. In some cases, it's just, this is a rifle. It shoots these kind of bullets. But in a lot of games, even still, there are actual descriptions of the world itself. I first fell in love with item descriptions in the game of Destiny because a lot of item descriptions actually spoke directly about the lore of what was going on within the world that Destiny is set in. which is just an alternate form of our own world, but whatever. Anyway, so item descriptions in Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 are often written about stories of people within the history of Eora, or just specific people, or talking about certain topics, or about the creation of the item itself. And you can usually glean some lore off of it, and you just get a little bit more flavor for the world in general. So this first item I'm going to look at is a scepter, which is a type of weapon in the game of Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, called the Eye of Wall. And the item description reads, "The moment the scepter is in your hand, a chorus of voices rise. They chant in Engwithan, Eldadiran, Valian, Huana, each word holding its echo in languages you do not know. We read the books not yet written. We see beyond the shroud of death. We seek the heart of all knowledge. We walk on plains beyond. Defy the wheel, defy death. Take the seal, the eye, the mark. Awaken." Inscribed along the shaft of the scepter is the phrase Esoterica Proliferata. And that's it. So there's this scepter, the Eye of Wall, and when you pick it up, you hear a bunch of voices in your head, chanting in languages you don't know. And they're chanting, I'm guessing anyways, they're chanting that thing I read to you, that we read books that are not yet written, blah, 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 blah. Take the seal, the eye, the mark, and awaken. So this is the item description that we have. So some of the lore that we get, I don't know if it's like hard lore or what you would consider soft lore, but we get a little bit more flavor about things associated with the god Wall, such as a chorus of voices rising in your head. Where do the voices come from? Who knows? It's a mystery, but also you don't know any of the voices. You don't know the languages that they're chanting in. It specifically says languages you do not know. So this is from the perspective of the player character. Now, would this happen for every person that picks it up? Or is it does it always speak languages that the holder of the scepter doesn't know? Or is it specifically speaking these words in a language that you, the player character, just happen not to know? Me personally, just based off of Wall-light theology that we've been reading elsewhere, I'd like to think that whoever is holding the Eye of Wall will hear things in languages that they specifically do not know, which is hilarious because it might be saying something very important, but you don't know what they're saying, right? There is a meaninglessness to this incredibly meaningful statement, and yet you just don't know what it is. But that being said, of course, the statement is somehow understood because it's in here in the item description, but it's said in languages that you don't understand. So there's this meaningful meaninglessness all in one. And it's, again, contradictory, but that's Wall for you. We read the books not yet written. We see beyond the shroud of death. We seek the heart of all knowledge. We walk on plains beyond. Now, this is all talking about a lot of, I would say, paradoxical stuff. We read books not yet written. How can you read books that are not yet written? I suppose that if you were purveyors of knowledge, if you had knowledge before things happen, or perhaps you had some sort of prescience or prophecy, maybe in that case, you're reading books that are literally in the future. I don't know how that's possible, but with Wall, it seems like a lot of things are possible. Seeing beyond the shroud of death might talk about a person being a watcher, which is someone who can see beyond the literal shroud into the in-between, which is between life and death. Seeking the heart of all knowledge, which I imagine is the god Wall themselves. And talking about defy the wheel, defy death, take the seal, the eye, the mark, I think has to do with the narratives that we actually see for the story within the second Pillars of Eternity game, so I'm not going to ruin that here. But just an interesting little flavor from a Wall-light perspective. This second item is a cloak from the second Pillars of Eternity game called Shroud of the Phantasm. The fabric of this cloak appears to be stitched with some manner of mystical pattern, but the pattern changes with the movement of the garment, confusing the eye into seeing what isn't there. Students of Wall have quietly experimented with illusions, ever fascinated with theories that the world around them is a deception, a dream, or both. One year, an entire class of ambitious apprentices organized around the idea, forming a secretive coterie of existential skeptics. They donned cloaks like these to recognize one another outside of their covert meetings. A dozen such cloaks were later found abandoned among a library stack of tomes. The fate of the bearers and their research is unknown, but the cloaks have circulated ever since as arcane curiosities. And so this is a cloak, one of a dozen cloaks, it sounds like, that identified members of this secret coterie of existential skeptics, as it says here, that doubted reality around them, it sounds like. They quietly experimented with this idea that the world around them is a deception, a dream, or both, which is, they say, it's a dream that is not congruent with what is actually real outside of the dream itself. So it's a complete, not only just a farce, it's an illusion, but it's also a lie of what it could even exist. And so they're trying to research this idea that the world is in fact a dream or a deception, some form of illusion. And we don't know what happened to that research. Now, what happened to them? Did the Hand Occult get them and bring them into their ranks and then destroy or hide their research? Maybe. Or maybe they found the truth and it was just too crazy for them to put out there. Or maybe they didn't discover anything at all and they just decided to go their own separate way. We don't really know. But it's an interesting idea. Is the world of Eora an illusion? Is it just a dream of something else? There's definitely a lot of interesting lore, especially when I think about the Iguithans and their search for the creator deities, and some of the things that they may or may not have found. It makes me wonder if any of that is possible. Like, how much of the world of Eora is concrete in that way? Just more questions, less answers for you. This item is called the Scroll of Wall. It's a document and quest item from the first Pillars of Eternity game. This ancient scroll is bound with a silver thread. The broken wax seal is stamped with a shape of an eye, so that's very likely the icon associated with Wall. The scroll at first appears to be gibberish, a collection of symbols and characters with no apparent connection between them. As you study them, however, you could swear that the characters begin to move. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they shift and crisscross and realign, and you're able to read the text, which says, "A simpleton seeks out a wise man, said to know the answer to every question. Please," says the simpleton, "you have to help me. The world terrifies me. I wake each morning. I don't know why. I make choices each day, and I don't know what will happen as a result. I go to sleep each night, and I don't know whether it will be my last." When the simpleton finishes, he notices that the wise man is weeping. The simpleton apologizes profusely and asks the wise man what he said that has upset him. The wise man shakes his head and wipes the tears from his eyes, and he answers, "Some people have all the luck." So I like this one because I kind of alluded to this item a little bit earlier when I was waxing philosophically about Wallite theology and about this idea that, like, if you know everything, like if you know every answer to every question, then what meaning exists in the world? And if you have a life that has no meaning, what kind of existence is that, you know? And so, like, there's this person here who is said to know the answer to every question. And there is this simpleton, as they're described, who just appears to not know anything. And he is pleading to this wise man to answer some of his questions because he just doesn't know anything. He doesn't know why he sleeps. He doesn't know why he wakes up. He doesn't know this. He doesn't know that. And the wise man is like mourning this. He's like, some people have all the luck. Clearly, he views it as a blessing to have mysteries in life. He has no more mysteries. He has no more questions to ask, no more answers to seek. And I think that that's kind of what the Scroll of Wall is moving towards. Yeah, that is like the idea that there are mysteries is in itself the only meaning that you can really have in a meaningless world. Now, why specifically the pursuit of knowledge? I don't know. But, you know, Obsidian had to pick something, and I think this is a pretty cool one as far as it goes. Anyways, the next item is called Raiment of Wall's Eyes. This is a unique robe that you can find in the first Pillars of Eternity game, specifically in the first White March DLC. It's described as, "This gray cloak is covered in a multitude of stylized eyes, symbols of the god Wall. It is said to have been created by the wizard of Gorin, who hoped that the pious endeavor might invoke Wall's protection. Set against the many eyes of the 100 mysteries, Gorin hoped his enemies would stumble after falsehoods, while he would remain resistant to the bewildering effects of the world's mysteries. Those who have come across the cloak since have found much use in its enchantments. What became of Gorin himself is unknown, however, for nothing else remains of the man or his works." For game's sake, when you have this robe equipped, you gain a spell called Mirrored Image. You also get 25 defense against charmed, confused, or dominating attacks, which attack your mind. So it says here that this gray cloak is created by a wizard, Gorin, who created this to invoke Wall's protection. Specifically, he was hoping that his enemies would see the cloak and stumble after falsehoods, and that he would remain resistant to the bewildering effects of the world's mysteries. So that he would have, I guess, it sounds like so that the wearer would have a clarity of mind, while the people who looked at the robe would lose that clarity. And I think it's reflected in the game mechanics of having mirrored image, which means it kind of like makes illusory copies of yourself so people won't know which of you is the real one. But it also protects your mind against being attacked by other people through psychic abilities of some sort. So I could see how like there's the gamified version of the lore there. And we're seeing, again, more themes associated with Wall of like obfuscation of information or clarity and revelation of information. So this is just all consistent with the lore associated with Wall. The next item is a soulbound mace that we find in the first Pillars of Eternity game, White March DLC, the first one. It can only be used by a priest or rogue. It is called Night Shroud. Now, soulbound weapons are weapons that when a person uses them, they will level up as that person uses it, but only that person can use it. If you try to give that weapon to another person, it basically resets its progress. So you're kind of incentivized to keep soulbound weapons with one person at a time. Each time you level up the weapon, you gain more item description and therefore more lore or more story, what have you. Okay, and so there are 4 levels to this weapon, but I am just going to read the last one because it's the only one that has anything to do with what we're talking about today. So the first 3 levels talk about some of the origins of this weapon and who created it, etc., etc. And I'm not going to cover that here because this episode's already big enough as it is. As well, it's pretty Wall-E of me to leave some information out for you to go find for yourself. So there you go. Night Shroud, if you want to go look it up on the internet. But anyways, at level 4, it unlocks saying Night Shroud was eventually returned to Durgan's Battery, that's a place within the world of Aora, by a young priestess of Wall who received a vision of the mace's creation from his god. Vassal, the smith who had forged it, that is the weapon Night Shroud, was a grown man and a master smith at the battery, but he recognized the mace immediately. When he asked the priestess why she'd brought it, that is Night Shroud, back to him, the young woman said, "All things are found that they might be lost again. This is the wisdom of the obscured." And with that, she departed. It's not much. It's not a lot. Like, honestly, the bulk of the lore for this thing has more to do with Durgan's Battery and things like that. But at the very end here, you have this little bit of Wall. And this little, I don't know, you call this a proverb of Wall. All things that are found that they might be lost again is something I have heard said in the actual games of Pillars of Eternity. Things are lost that they may again, or things are found that they may can be lost. And usually we hear it the other way around. Things that are lost will one day be found. So if you're going to roleplay as a Wallite in a tabletop role-playing game, maybe adopt this moniker into your gameplay. The last thing I'm going to talk about is an item that you can't really have in game, but it is more of an item that exists within the world at large, and it's called Wall's Cupboard. And no, I am not talking about the Dark Cupboard, which is a magic shop in Neketaka, although that shop in Neketaka is named after Wall's Cupboard. This is something that you can read about in page 93 of the second volume guidebook for the Pillars of Eternity game, the second Pillars of Eternity game. So this is a section of the book that is just talking about some specific religious and important relics within the history of the world, and this one is about Wall's Cupboard. It is the nature of Wall, god of dreams and illusions, to always be transitory, cloaked in confusion and a source of existential doubt. Such is the case of Wall's Cupboard, which is at once a reliquary and a shrine with no fixed size or location. No one knows when or how the cupboard came into existence. The why of it is more obvious, as a joke meant to pull the rug out from under the feet of reason. The cupboard has been known to take the form of closets, chests, jewelry boxes, snuff boxes, or entire municipal buildings. When an unsuspecting kith flips the lid or opens the door, the expected contents are missing. What they find instead is a black void filled with winking eyes of various shape and size, and the sound of uncontrollable laughter bubbling out at a high volume and heard only by them. As the victim reels in shock, the door lid slams closed. Opening again reveals the sane and rational contents as expected. Followers of Wall can usually be identified by the state of their homes, in which contain multitudes of boxes, doors, and chests far in excess of their needs. Though Wall tends to favor the more buttoned and official members of society with these visitations, all Wallites hope that the next box they open will reveal itself as a portal to the unknown. Neketaka's magic shop, the Dark Cupboard, is named in honor of Wall's strange artifact. No one but its proprietor, the Archmage of Arkmere, knows for certain if the building ever housed Wall's surprising manifestation. And so there we have the description for Wall's Cupboard. Okay, I don't know if it's just me. I never actually looked it up. I really should have thought to ask the community this question, so I guess I'm going to ask it now on the podcast. Has anyone ever seen in Pillars of Eternity 1 or 2 something like this happen? Have you ever opened a chest in the game of Pillars of Eternity 1 or 2 and had this happen where there was just nothing in there and there was like just this image of a void with eyeballs in it and then you got like an audio bite of laughter? Did anyone ever get that? Because I don't recall that ever happening. And when I read this in the guidebook for the second game, I thought maybe it would be in the second game, but I never did see it. And like I always hoped it would happen. And so I'm really hoping and avowed that this happens just once, and not in every single playthrough. Not everybody will get it. It's just one of those things that's really low chance it'll happen. But anytime you open something that could be classified as a walls cupboard, that it will do this thing. So just to quickly summarize, walls cupboard is an object, but it's not a specific object that exists anywhere in the world. Basically, any sort of thing that can be considered a vessel, like a box or a chest, anything can become walls cupboard at any point in time. And that's why later on you read here that Wallites have a whole bunch of boxes in their house because they hope that maybe they'll open it and it'll be the actual walls cupboard. But any storage unit basically can be walls cupboard, and you'll open the door, you'll lift the lid, and instead of seeing what you're expecting to see, which is the stuff in the box or the space inside of a building, it's just an empty void filled with eyes, uncontrollable laughter that only you can hear. You close the door in shock, reopen it again, and everything's back to normal. That's all it is. It's really cool, and it's hilarious and a little bit creepy and unsettling. And why is it there? Who knows? We don't know. Is it Wall just being hilarious? Maybe Wall just likes pulling pranks. Maybe he's just like, hey, this will be a giggle. Why not? Or maybe, just maybe, it's a rip in the seam of this abstract reality that they live in because it's actually all a dream. It's not real. And every now and then, the matrix that is this world falls apart. You open a door and the contents of the door didn't load before you, the character, walked into that thing because you're actually an NPC in the world or something like that, and it didn't load, and what you saw was the void of something not loading. But when you closed the door, it had finished loading and it reset. I don't know. Anyways, I'm just I kind of went a little crazy there for a second. Anyways, Obsidian, for the love of Wall, put this in Avowed. Just once. You open a thing, and then the screen just kind of goes into the swirling vortex of eyes and laughter, and the companions are like, are you okay? Are you all right? And then the next time they look, everything's normal. Don't explain it. Don't explain it to anybody playing the game. Just let them be like, what the hell was that? Because one, for people who are informed about the game, they'll be like, that's Walls Cupboard. That's bloody hilarious. Thank you, Obsidian. And for the people that don't understand, they'll be like, what the hell? And then they'll be hooked. They'll have to know what the heck this is about. They'll go on the internet and do searches about it. Just do it. Just trust me. It's a great idea. You already know it's a great idea. If anyone hasn't already thought of it, I'm sure you have, because you guys are great. But just in case no one's thought of it, please put that in Avowed. That would be hilarious. Or at least in a future game. I don't know. Actually, you know what would be even better is if you put it in the Outer Worlds, because that would actually be more Wall-lite, in my opinion. That would be great if Walls Cupboard appeared in a different game, but it wasn't in the game set in the world of Aora. Actually, yeah, do that instead. I take back what I said. Anyways. All right, everybody. So I've been recording over an hour at this point. I don't know how much of this is going to get edited down, but let's get ready to start closing down. Now, before I move into the closing out section, I do want to point one thing out. There is a short story called The House of Wall, which again, you can find in PC files for the first Pillars of Eternity game. I think there's also, if you go on Obsidian's website, I can't remember now, I think you might actually be able to access that short story there. And it is a short story that is very Wall-lite themed. And there is some lore in there, but I didn't want to read through this whole thing and pick it apart. I think it's something that is just better for someone to listen to, because there is an audiobook version of it, or just experience reading for yourself. As a lot of the stuff that we cover that you'll see in there is kind of consistent with what we've already talked about. And there's nothing really hard lore in there. It's more just the application of some of the lore we've talked about here. You see a lot of those themes repeated. So that's The House of Wall. Go check it out. Now, let's ask my favorite question that we like to ask in these pre-Avowed days of this podcast's existence. What does this topic, that is Wall, have to do with the game of Avowed?
Is an oath worth the weight of a crown?
Now, speculatively, there could be a lot that Wall could do with Avowed. I mean, Wall is one of the 11 deities that exist within this world, and the deities have a really strong presence and impact in the stories that can be told within the world of Aora. So depending on what Obsidian wants to do with Wall, they could include Wall themes throughout the story of Aora. We could also run into existing factions like the Sorrows of Forgotten Dreams or the Hand Occult. We could run into a new faction that is introduced in the game of Avowed that is dedicated to the God Wall. We could find Wall's Cupboard. We could run. There's so much. There's so much that could happen. That I can't even list them all here. Only Wall would be able to help me list them all here. But I think a lot of these applications are pretty obvious. There's a god within the world. There are religious organizations dedicated to that god. So we might have unique items associated with God. Maybe we'll have something like some of the weapons we see, the science weapons in the Outer Worlds. Like, what is that one? The mandibular or something or other that rearranges people's faces or changes the size of people in that game. Maybe we'll get a weapon that has wild magic kind of thing with it, where it's you hit them with this hammer and it does damage, but it also has some other effect, some random effect on a table hit on like a table hidden in the background of the game's mechanics. It'll either make them more powerful or weaker, or maybe it'll give you a random boon. So there might be some unique items like that. There might be some quests associated with factions. We might get to talk to Wall itself or themselves, learn more about the world. And lastly, there is also the running theory, and I've talked about this before, that Wall is actually your patron deity of your character in the Game of Avowed. If you didn't already know, in the Game of Avowed, you play as a godlike character, which is a normal person that was blessed by one of the gods when they were in the womb of their mother, and they were born with really weird physiological traits. And you could be a Wallite godlike, and that is definitely possible. And I think that there's some credibility to that theory, especially since we see a lot of Wallite themes associated in the Game of Avowed. For one, the thing that's plaguing the Living Lands is called the Dream Scourge, and Wall is associated with dreams, where people are kind of living in these waking nightmares. And there's obviously a big secret mystery that needs to be revealed or hidden, I don't know. But also there's a lot of fungus going on. And we didn't talk a lot about fungus in today's episode, but if you play the Forgotten Sanctum DLC, this DLC for the Deadfire game, there is a heavy presence of mushrooms there. Granted that it's its own thing, it has its own thing to do. It's not because Wall is there, there's also mushrooms. But there's an association that was kind of built there, and I wonder if that kind of theme continued into Avowed, or if Wall just decided he likes mushrooms now, and so what mushrooms are part of his thing. Because he could do that, why not? And there's definitely a lot of credibility to thinking this. When you see gameplay for Avowed, that we can only see some footage, a little bit of footage that people put out now, there seems to be this entity that exists that is associated with your godlike. Every godlike knows, generally speaking, who it is the god they're associated with, but your character in Avowed, you don't know who the god that blessed you to make the godlike that you are is. You're some sort of fungal godlike, so again, it seems like it could be associated with Wall, and the entity in question, who I only can refer to as the Voice, as my best guess, I don't even know if that's true, they don't seem to answer any questions directly either, so they might, let's say they don't know if they're your godlike or not, but what god would be able to forget knowledge about being a person's godlike? Wall. I don't think any of the other gods could do that. So, I don't know. I really think there's a lot of credibility to the theory that Wall is actually the deity behind the Dream Scourge, or Wall is the deity that we're going to be either working with or fighting against in the Game of Avowed. I don't know if I necessarily believe that's true, but there's definitely some credibility to the idea. And so that's another way that it could be related to Avowed. If anyone listening to this episode, thank you for getting this far, by the way. If anyone has any ideas on how Wall and Wall themes could be involved in the Game of Avowed, and you just want to share a cool idea, please email me, worldofaora@gmail.com. If not only to have a conversation with a fellow nerd, but also if you want me to share it on any future episode, I will happily do that. But if you have any other questions, comments, concerns, praises, or criticisms of today's episode or the show in general, please send them to worldofaora@gmail.com. If you would like to follow the show's Twitter, you can do so at World of Aora. I mostly just repost stuff that is important for Avowed or Pillars of Eternity, but I also post episode updates or anything that if I'm going to be away for a while. Lastly, if you want to support the show, you can do so at ko-fi.com/World of Aora. That is not there. I don't expect anyone to do it. It's just there for those who find value in supporting the content that they like. But if you want to support this show, but you don't want to do so through that particular way, you can also rate, review, and share this podcast with others. If you do a rating or leave a review or answer questions on Spotify, all of that engages with the algorithm, which tells other people that listen to similar content you listen to that, hey, you might like this as well. And then more people will find it. I'm not doing this as a full-time job or anything, so I'm not investing my ego with my listener count. But if this show gets in the hands of somebody who gets value out of it, then I want that to happen. I want people to be enlightened by content that they enjoy. So if you can help that get out, that's a way to help support the show as well. But otherwise, just listen to the show and enjoy it. Send me an email to help engage and make it a little bit better in any way, shape, or form. That always helps as well. But that's everything for today. Thanks, everyone, for listening to this really long episode. I'm sorry it was so long. I know I try to be a little shorter, but I've also haven't had episodes out for a while. I'm going to start returning to weekly episodes soon. That's what I'm planning on doing as the busy season for UPS has been winding down. So I'm getting back to kind of a normal routine, but we'll see. I think that routine is hopefully going to change again really soon. We're going to see how that goes. I'll update you more on that later. But yeah, thank you for that. This has been a special episode for me. It's kind of why I went all in on it, and it's been a really fun one to do. The last thing I'll say before I go is what I've been playing. The game that I have been playing is Hyper Light Breaker. It's a game that's in early access. It's developed by a studio that's very near and dear to my heart. No pun intended, because that studio is called Heart Machine. I played their debut game, Hyper Light Drifter, a long time ago, and it was a phenomenal game. I was in university for education at the time, and I was blown away how they were able to create an entire game that didn't use dialogue or text to introduce the player to the mechanics or the story. They just left it up to the environment and imagery. I thought it was an amazing way to do it, and I also really liked the world they created. And then the game Solar Ash that they created after that, with just the mechanics, it was very fun. It was the first game I ever streamed on Twitch. I got all the trophies for it on PlayStation. It was amazing. So Heart Machine has always been a studio that I really pay attention to. And they've been they've been very important for me as a gamer anyways. I said on Avowedcast, Hyper Light Breaker is almost more important to me than Avowed, just in the sense that I have a very personal attachment to these games and I really like them. Avowed has clearly got more of my attention. But yeah, Hyper Light Breaker is out. It is an open world action roguelite game. It's in early access, so I'll let you know that now. There are definitely some bugs there. It needs polish and smoothing right now, so don't expect it to run the best. You can only get it on Steam. Definitely try to have more than the minimum PC requirements. I'm going to say that as a heads up. But it's got really good bones. It needs meat on the bones, but it's got really good bones. It's fun moving around in the world. The open world and roguelite aspect of it is actually a really cool system they've made. It seems like there's also a lot of lore in the world that's probably going to be hidden. It hasn't revealed a lot, but it feels like they're going to be able to tell a decent story through it in some way, shape, or form. I'm not really huge into roguelikes or roguelites, but I feel like this is a game that might get me into that genre really well. I enjoyed just meeting in the game a bunch of randos and playing through the game, getting upgrades very slowly. It's a very difficult game, but it's very vibrant and colorful and reactive and quite fun. And minute to minute, there's a good gameplay loop, at least in my opinion. So if any of those things sound interesting to you, go check out Hyper Light Breaker on early access on Steam right now. I'm not sure if this is still true, but if you buy it right now, you also get Hyper Light Drifter with the purchase as well. And it was really affordable, in my opinion. It was only like $32 Canadian, which I thought the game was going to be $50 on its own. So I'm pretty happy with that. But that's what I've been playing. I might not be playing that super consistently just because it's in early access. I'm looking forward to Citizen Sleeper 2 releasing at the end of January. I also have a suspicion that Tales of Arise is going to leave Game Pass soon, so I'm kind of whittling away at that. But yeah, that's what I've been playing. What have you been playing? Send me an email, worldofar@gmail.com. But otherwise, let's close out the episode. Thanks everyone for listening on this episode regarding Wall. It's been really fun. I can't wait to see you guys in future episodes. I'm going to do a kind of pre-Avowed lore episode. I might do a recap on the lore series of Obsidian is doing. I'm also thinking of doing an episode about expounding on the lore of stuff that I constantly repeat, because if you've listened to my show for a long time, you know that there are some topics that I constantly am giving little 30-second snippets on, explaining over and over again. So I might just do an episode as a foundation for new listeners when Avowed comes out. That's kind of my plans. But again, if you have any topics that you want me to cover, you're interested in, or haven't talked about yet, please send me an email. I know some of you have emailed asking for companion episodes, and so I've been looking at doing more companion episodes. But I've also been waiting to see if any of them show up in Avowed in some way before doing that. But send me emails. Let me know if there's anything you want. Otherwise, I'll pick them myself. I have no problem doing that. Anyways, sorry, I'm done. Okay, goodbye. Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino. I'll see you next time.